he's associated with an organization that actually goes back some time. Some of you may be familiar with Antonio Paris. He's been a speaker here. He was involved with MUFON for a while. And Antonio, I think, was one of the originators way back when in this organization, Aerial Phenomena Investigations. So Peter and I saw him, and I said, same reaction I had with Justin. I said, boy, we got to have him speak. And he was nice enough to immediately agree to speak. He's a graduate of Iowa State and Johns Hopkins Universities. And Johns Hopkins, you know what that means. He's a pretty smart guy. Astronomical engineer with 37 years experience. Since 2011, Paul has been investigating UFO sightings with Aerial Phenomena Investigations and is currently the director of the group. Comes here all the way from Silver Spring, Maryland. And what impressed, I guess, Peter and I when we saw him was somebody, again, that actually approaches it from a scientific point of view. And since our theme was partly science and speculation, he was a natural. So, for his inaugural appearance at Mysteries of Space and Sky, please welcome Paul Carr.
All right. Well, hello. My name is not Antonio Paris. I kind of miss Antonio because he's a much better promoter and a much better person at shaking the bushes to get case reports than I am. I'm more of a quiet technical type, but I'm happy to be here today. Thank you, Peter, for inviting me. And my purpose in being here is to encourage you to make contact with us. We are looking for cases, more and better cases. We're looking to inform people about what we do and how we do it. And we want to work with the research community in general to improve the quality of UFO research, improve the openness of UFO research, to make sure that we all have access to detailed case data, all with very, very tight ethical controls on how we protect witness privacy and witness anonymity. So that's a bit of a tension there, because you'd like, if you share everything, you're violating people's trust. So I'll talk about that more in depth. So I'm here to reach out. I want to encourage you to go to our website, reportaufo.com. Oops. And if you go there, you'll land on our reporting page, reportaufo.org, excuse me. And you'll land on our reporting page. But however, you can see all these different tabs here. So you can learn about our podcast, our investigations, our video, and you can click the Contact Us link. And what is that? Contact us. And if you want to be added to our email list, we'd be happy to do that. Just put your email in there and say, please add me to your email list, and that's all you have to do. We'll add you, and about once a month or so, you'll get an email from us saying what we're up to. And I encourage you to check out our videos. We have a growing library of videos that we are putting up on YouTube, and we also have a podcast with about 30 or so episodes of two different kinds, conversations. Justin Banforth is in one of the conversations, and we also have full-length episodes which are more magazine style and talk about a lot of different topics. So what we're trying to do here is attack the UFO mystery in a scientific way, in an ethical way, and in an open way. And what we want to do is implement a vision of modern UFO research where we all have access to a lot of information. We're all not, and there's a network of peer organizations that are all doing different things and working different cases, and some are doing more meta research, and others are doing actual boots on the ground case investigation, which is what we do. So, and I'm going to provide a number of specific examples until I run out of time, essentially. First, a bit about philosophy. Let me bring, and by the way, let me bring up my visual aids here while I'm thinking about that. And I think I'll skip one more. Okay, report at ufo.org. That's all you have to remember, and everything else will while I am a persistent advocate of taking a scientific approach to UFOs, I don't believe that the study of UFOs at present is yet a science in the normal sense. Because we are not a normal science, we are often accused of being a pseudoscience, which that's really tarring everyone with the same brush and is unfair. Research in UFOs has none of the characteristics of normal science. And if it did, that would be rather odd. To study UFOs like we study species of beetles doesn't make sense. However, that doesn't mean we can't be scientific. We can choose, we must choose, whether we're going to be a real proto-science that practices epistemic humility and fails forward, and we will fail. But let's fail creatively and usefully. Or a cargo cult pseudoscience characterized by epistemic arrogance, emphasizing entertainment value, emphasizing dogma or belief systems, and failing in the same ways again and again. We, the volunteer UFO research community, have investigated, studied, and cataloged UFOs with widely varying quality and almost no funding for 70 years or more. We're still doing it, and I think we should be doing it. But we need to rethink the questions we're asking and the nature of the data we actually have. We're also going to continue to be wrong about the underlying nature of the phenomena, and that's okay. Okay. I can kind of sum up in a nutshell 4 virtues that I think we should be practicing, and they are very simply humility, patience, integrity, and skepticism. Yes, I use the S word. I think we should be skeptical too, in the right way. I've gone into these 4 virtues in much more detail on our podcast in the segment Unidentified Science, and I encourage you to listen to those or to look them up on our website. Now, first, a bit of a dry but very important topic. Now, I don't like to tell people what to do, but you should not report your sighting to any organization that is not completely upfront about their ethics policies. Our policies are clearly stated on our website, and we train new field investigators in the ethical policies. And we have videos up. We have one video so far about our ethical policy that summarizes it, and every field investigator working for us is required to watch that video and be able to answer questions about it. We have to remember that we need the trust and we need the assurance of witnesses, many of whom feel very, very hesitant to even talk about their experience. So we have to put them at ease. Now, our ethics statement is right here, And our website, you don't have to remember that URL. Just go to reportofufo.org. It'll be there. Okay, so our principles in a nutshell is, number one, the well-being of the witness is paramount. We have to remember we are primarily dealing with people, many of whom may feel very upset or frightened or even exhilarated by their experiences. Some even report injuries, and some clearly need professional help. That's no joke. The well-being of the witness must be paramount, even if we don't get to the bottom of the case as a result. Also very important is the anonymity and privacy of witnesses. We do not let any information out that might identify or help identify a witness, and we err on the side of caution. For example, if the location of a sighting is near a person's home or place of work, we will not give the exact location in our report. We will obfuscate it or even redact it altogether. The reports, all reports are redacted of anything that might be identifying. And as you'll see, reports are kind of our bread and butter. With 1 and 2 in mind, oops, I didn't. I skipped over that. There we go. With 1 or 2 in mind, we think it's our duty, our responsibility to share as much data as we can about our cases with the research community. Sharing personal identifying data is only done under very controlled conditions, with the knowledge and permission of the witness. Sharing case data that's not personally identifying, we do very openly, and we don't charge any money for it. We put it out there, and we're going to get more and more better organized, more searchable information as we proceed. And finally, and this is not as easy as it sounds, the witness's narrative of their experience belongs to them. We will share with them all of our findings based on fact. But when someone has a life-altering experience, it is not our job to interpret it for them. Human memory is a fragile and very personal thing, and we have to respect our witnesses' memories. And by the way, it is a very good sign when a witness is open to different ways to interpret what they remember. Keep that in mind if you're speaking to a witness. If they say, oh, well, this was Zorgon from Zeta Reticuli who was talking to me, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a dream. The ones that I really trust the most are the ones that say, I don't know what happened. I'm not sure who that really was. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was something else. It seemed real to me. That's what I remember. That's what we're looking for. And I'll show you a witness who's just like that later on. He's a fantastic serial experience witness. So now let's get on to the field investigation. Okay, I think the dang, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Field investigation, as I see it, has a very simple aim: to take raw reports, of which there are many, and most of which are not very good, gather all the relevant facts surrounding each report, explain all the reports that admit to explanation. Now, unlike Project Blue Book, it's not our job to explain every report, just the ones that admit to explanation, which is the majority of them, and to evaluate the quality of the evidence for the validities of the report if we can't explain it. We then publish our findings widely and make as much of our data as possible available to the wider community. So we're not trying to do everything. We're the field investigators. We're boots on the ground. We're trying to find out what really happened, what are the facts surrounding each case, what do we know, what do we not really know yet. And then you can take over from there. we find connections between cases or new evidence, but this is rare. Field investigation is not the end of UFO research. It is a first step. We are essentially a filter. It's like, that's my bad attempt to show a filter icon. The output is a catalog of cases that were explained and reported the relevant facts, including some non-identifying facts about the witnesses. And we are working on gathering information about witnesses that doesn't identify them, but still statistically at least tells us something about who these people are who are reporting to us. That's something I'm not going to talk about in detail today, but something that we think is really important. And we also provide a peer-reviewed analysis of the evidence. The evidence is evidence for that the witness account was correct and accurate, or it wasn't. You know, it can go both ways. So where do we go from there? In some cases, maybe a deeper dive with more resources, more specialized expertise, and there's a lot of cases. This is one of the reasons I'm reaching out. We often need expertise we don't have. So we look for people who can help us find the answers to some very difficult questions. And I'll show you briefly a case where we needed somebody who was more of a medical expert, and we didn't have that expertise in our group. And also preferably a medical expert who speaks Russian. It was a very difficult one for me. We did the best we could with it, but basically all we could do is say, here's what we learned. Hopefully you have some better idea of what this means than we do. Okay. In most situations, it's a search for patterns across unexplained cases that I really don't think it's all that productive working with the raw reports, because most of them are very explainable and many are just flat out spurious. There's no reason to believe that raw and investigated unexplained reports should have the same statistics at all. So that's something that we should keep in mind when we hear about, you know, Vancouver has more sightings than Portland, Oregon. You know, those are just raw reports. You don't really know until you look beneath the surface. So field investigators who simply record the witness account and fill in a form, in my view, aren't doing their job. You have to dive down into the report. You have to really look at, could they have seen that? What did they see? What are the possible alternative explanations? And you don't have to have a certain answer. You just have to say, well, here are some likely answers to this. As you've noted, most witnesses leave many important details out of raw reports, or they get those details wrong. It's part of our task to get those details as correct as possible and to note any uncertainty where it exists if it does. We do a deep dive into any reasonable explanations and note all puzzling aspects about those explanations, keeping in mind the vagaries of human memory and perception. On a side note, when a witness says, it couldn't have been X, they are often completely wrong. It couldn't have been an airplane. It couldn't have been a balloon. Well, sometimes it could have been. So you can't take that literally. It just tells you something about how they perceived it. IFOs. Let's talk briefly about IFOs. Come over here. I don't know if this is going to play or not, but we get a lot of IFOs. You've probably all seen these. This one, well, I guess it didn't play. Let's see. Can I get it to play? Yeah, okay. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but this is shot up in Canada in the daytime, and boy, does it look weird. It's the planet Venus, by the way. The reason it looks like it's moving is the clouds are moving in the opposite direction. But I did the astronomy, I checked it out. It's absolutely the planet Venus. It looks like the planet Venus should have looked at that time. The guy did a nice job filming it. It's actually not moving all that fast. Um, and so he was very disappointed. He was convinced he'd seen an alien spaceship. Okay, now we get a lot of balloons and fire lanterns, also known as Chinese lanterns. Balloons are very common, particularly high altitude balloons. Now, I grew up in East Texas where we had a high altitude balloon, NASA high altitude balloon facility nearby. So we saw a lot of them, but many people never see them until that one time where they see that bright thing in the sky. So we get quite a few of those. Lens flares, very, very common. Now, the thing about a lens flare is you didn't see it when you took the picture, but it came out on the picture. And it has certain characteristics that will depend on your camera and the nature of the light source. Generally, cameras with more compound lenses, expensive lenses, will actually produce more complex light flares than cell phone cameras, which have very simple lenses. And these are some examples of lens flares. Sometimes they look a lot like some kind of spaceship from outer space, but they're not. And it's pretty easy to tell. With a little bit of experience, you can tell a lens flare from something that's not. And I'll show you an example of one that's not, that might have been interpreted as a lens flare. It's not. It's a real UFO, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Can anyone guess what this is? What? It's not a meteor, and it's not a contrail. That's right. Yeah, that's what it is. But our witness was convinced that this was something weird in the sky. But if you'll take a quick look, you'll notice that the flower in the foreground is kind of in focus. The tree in the background is not. That's in focus, so it's got to be real close. And so that's how I knew it was a piece of spider web. So we get a lot of those things. I'll maybe show you a couple more examples. Biologicals. Oh, this is a really good one. I just got this one from Ireland a couple of weeks ago. The guy is convinced it's proof that we're not alone. Marcia and I took a really close look at it, and we think we're not alone on this planet. We have other species of beings. This is a cheap night vision camera. I cleaned it up a little and zoomed in a bit and stabilized it best I could. It's pretty clearly a flock of geese. We get a lot of we don't get a lot of birds, but that is in night vision they can look weird, and geese do fly at night. Most birds don't, but they do. Okay. Now I'm going to get into a real case, a case that I really enjoyed working. This is why I do this. This is the fun stuff. Every once in a while you get a really great witness. Now this guy was a skilled photographer. He knew what he was doing. He had a very nice camera. He had a camera I would want. It was in 2015. It was an EOS Canon D2 Mark III, which is a really, really nice camera. There's now a Mark IV out. But I don't know how well you can see this image on the screen, but it's a really beautiful night sky image, 30-second exposure. I'll show you. I'm going to ruin it in the next chart to bring the contrast up so you can see better. He was there with his son. They both saw this object. They also saw the space station. That's what they were trying to get, was a space station. They knew it was going to come by. They saw it, and they got a 30-second exposure of it. It's in really good focus. It's on a nice tripod, very stable. The guy knows how to take a picture on a tripod, and shot in RAW format. If you don't know what that is, it's okay, but it's the format we encourage people to take UFO photos in. Most of you don't even know that your camera can do that, but it's better than JPEG. And we have the RAW file straight from the camera, so chain of custody is the best. And We know the location exactly. We know the date exactly. We know the time. We know the time exactly because we know when the space station flew by that location. So we can nail the time. Clocks and cameras are often wrong. Sometimes they're off by days. Sometimes they're off by, they forget to set for daylight savings time or whatever. So you can't just look at the clock of the camera. You have to be careful with that. Okay, here I've ruined the beauty of this image, but it makes it a little easier to see. This is a 30-second exposure zoomed in and stretched. We're zooming in on the constellation Virgo, which, by the way, it took a while to identify. I won't go into the details, but he had the direction wrong initially. And so I was looking in the wrong constellation. Finally, I figured out he had it wrong, and I found it. That bright star down at the bottom, that's Spica. That streak is the space station. Just above that, there's a blue, almost kind of oval-shaped thing. That's a star. That's Zeta Virginis, also known as Heze. I didn't know it was Heze until I looked it up. And right next to that, you'll see a little kind of like donut-shaped thing. If you look on our website, you can see this in much more clarity. And that's the anomaly. That's what they saw flashing. They saw it flashing. Now notice it's a 30-second exposure. During that time, the Earth rotates about 1/8 of a degree. The stars appear to be slightly elongated ellipses as a result because the Earth's moving. The major axis of the ellipse is exactly parallel to the Earth's equator. Note that, well, Karen, let me see if I can, I think I have a more zoomed in version here. Yeah, here we are. Okay, there, see, that's a little bit elliptical, and that's the direction the Earth's rotating in right there. This is not stretched at all. It's flashing, so it's a very short exposure, even though the camera's open, the shutter's open for 30 seconds. This thing was just a flash. There's no evidence of any motion blur at all in that. Now, that's only 7 pixels, but it's still one of the best UFO photographs I've ever seen. It's very clear. It's 7 pixels. Now, you know, you'd like more pixels, but the guy was using a wide-angle lens, so we don't have that. We can use the measurement of width to determine a relationship between its size and distance, that is its angular size, because we know where the stars are, we know how far apart the stars are. Turns out it's about 3 milliradians in size, which means that that it's for every 100 meters away, it's about 30 centimeters wide, or about a foot wide. So if it's a football field away, it's a foot wide. If it's further, it's wider. You don't know its absolute size. You just don't. There's no way to determine that. If you had a second image taken from a different location, you could, but you don't have that. So now it's moving slowly. We found other dimmer images of it in the same image. That's the great thing of having a raw image. You can just play with it all day long, and you can pull up pixels, and you can find there's at least, we think there's 8 of them, 8 of those little images. So it's flashing, as the witnesses testified. It was flashing, and it was moving. It moved about 1 diameter per second, which a lot of things can move 1 diameter per second. Many things that they're flying move faster than that. They have to, or they fall out of the sky. Most birds move much faster than 1 diameter a second. And airplanes generally do as well. A balloon or a drone could move about that slow. By the way, this was silent, as you know, we're used to hearing that. There is a naval base off in that direction. It's about 11 kilometers away in Bremerton, Washington. But if it's near there, that disk is 33 meters wide, more than 100 feet, 110 feet. That's really big. And we think that's the actual shape of the light. We don't know it's the shape of the object, but we know it's the shape of the light. It's that sort of donut shape. It's not a focusing anomaly. This thing's in focus. So to wrap up, it's not a highly strange case, but it is a highly probable case. And it's a really good quality photograph. And my gut feel is it's stranger than than we can justify, but you shouldn't give me the time of day for my gut feel. Right? Here are the facts. The fact is, that's a real image of something that was flashing. It could be lots of things. It's not identified, but it's low strangeness. And that's why we use strangeness as more of a measure than identified, unidentified. Because some things are borderline identifiable, but we don't have an identification. And those are the low strangeness things. I still don't know what that is, and I always, every once in a while I come across another donut-shaped UFO, and I want to know more. And hopefully we'll find out more. Now this next case, back on the East Coast, back not far from here in Frederick County, I call it the building in the sky case. And I'm going to, now there are a lot of government facilities in Frederick, Carroll County, including, as you probably know, Camp David, which is a highly secure place where, well, starting with FDR, they would take the president there on the weekends. Because FDR was ill and he needed to go someplace where it wasn't so hot and humid and noisy, and so they'd take him up to Camp David to try to recuperate a little bit. And since then, it's been a common place for presidents to head to on the weekends. President Trump doesn't go there very often, but Obama did quite a bit, and other presidents have as well. And here's another Google Earth view of a secure government facility in Montgomery County. And these kinds of facilities, and this is I've driven by there. It's guarded and fenced in really well. There's a helipad. There's clearly an underground entrance. There's usually quite a few cars parked in the parking lot. Right down the road from that is a National Guard medical facility. So, and these kinds of facilities are so there's a lot of secure government facilities in this general area of northern central Maryland, and also some defense industry. So you would not be surprised to occasionally see things in the sky that are unusual, but we don't have, we didn't expect to see what this person saw. This was in November of 2012. There were actually two witnesses, but we mostly have the testimony from the primary witness, who was the driver of the car. And I will show you where, by the way, late 2012 was a busy time. We had a black triangle case in Montgomery County. So here's the general area. There's Frederick and there's Baltimore. And okay, this is where they started out in a little town, really just a crossroads, called Taylorsville in Carroll County, Maryland. And if you ever go to Taylorsville, there's a gas station and a diner and a couple other places. It's small. And she and her mother-in-law were driving down 27, and they made a right onto 26. And the red line there is where they saw the UFO as they were driving down the road. Just before she turned onto 26, she saw a law enforcement vehicle turn ahead of her. So that vehicle should have seen what they saw. We could not track down a report from any local law enforcement organization that reported it. Maybe they just decided to save themselves the trouble of having to explain that they'd seen something weird. She turned down 27, and she saw an extremely bright light off to her 11 o'clock. So kind of, you can sort of imagine where her 11 o'clock was, kind of just off to the left of that red line. And they traveled further west, and as they traveled further west, at first they just marked at each other. That's a very bright light. It's really, because the driver had grown up in Baltimore. She'd seen lots of police helicopters and other bright lights in the sky, and was not alarmed by them. And they noted to each other, "This is a very bright light. That's weird, kind of out here at 5 o'clock in the morning, and a winter's morning, and in rural Maryland." You can see that's mostly just farm country out there. A lot of vineyards. There's a dairy farm nearby. They drove down that road. They thought they thought it was a light. Then as they got closer, it was moved off. It was more off to their 9 o'clock as they were moving down the road. So they think it wasn't moving very much. It was just, and in my analysis, I assumed it didn't move much, but it was now a clearly visible structured object, and they described it as huge. And I have an analysis of how big it probably was based on her memories and descriptions. Of course, there's big error bars on that because we don't really know. But the bright star Sirius was in front of them, about where their 11 o'clock was, but higher up in the sky, and it's not consistent with it. And of course, they wouldn't see it at their 9 o'clock. It would stay in that same direction. So the astronomy didn't really check out here as being, we get a lot of cases like that where somebody sees something in the sky and it turns out to be a star or the moon or planet, but we don't think that was the case here. This is her sketch, the driver's sketch. This is the object she saw. Had a red light on one side. It was very bright and shining, and there was structure that she described as being like windows. She wasn't sure they were windows. And this is just when it was, she drew her car there down at the bottom, and the trees, and it went out of sight basically because the trees were off to their left and they couldn't, and it was now in the trees, and they were frightened. They wanted to get out of there, so they just kept driving. And I asked her, I always ask a witness, "Why didn't you take a picture?" She says, "My phone was in my glove box. I was not getting out of there. I just wanted to keep moving." Now, that case we think is a good case, but about a month later, a gentleman in Eldersburg, Maryland, who was, and this, by the way, is not a lens flare. It may look like one, but it's not. This is in Eldersburg, Maryland. Saw this during the day, but it was in December, so it was late afternoon really. He and his granddaughter were coming home, and he was almost at his residence, and he saw this thing up in the sky. It looked like it was just below the clouds. It looked semi-translucent to him, and was might have been flapping a little bit, but it seemed to be holding its position against the wind. You could see the clouds moving over the top of it. And so he stopped, and he got out, and he took 4 cell phone photographs with it. Now, these are great UFO photographs. They are not great photographs. They're really poor photographs, but they're great UFO photographs because we know exactly who took the photograph, where he was, when he was there, and we are able to, there's lots of foreground reference objects that we can use, and a background reference object, which is awesome. You hardly ever get that. We had the clouds, and we knew about how high those clouds are. They're about 6,000 feet. So we know a lot about this photograph, and the information about the photograph is more important than the quality of the photograph. And let me take you to zoomed in and enhanced. Now, it's about 30 pixels wide, a little bit better. We don't know how many of those details are real, but we think that by and large, there's some meaning to those apparent details. And this is a Samsung S6. Wasn't the best camera you've ever seen. It was very far away. It was not a zoomed in shot. You know, can't really zoom in with a cell phone anyway. Well, that's some of the newer ones maybe you can, but most of them just don't really. It's a digital zoom. You're just cropping out some of the field. But here he got. This is an excellent image because I can determine exactly how wide that thing is, and because I know how high the clouds were, and I know the exact angle that he was looking at, elevation and azimuth, because the foreground reference objects. I cropped some of them out, by the way, because they're people's houses, so I'm not going to show those publicly. But we were able to do the geometry very precise. That thing's about 12 kilometers away, maybe further. It's big. It's now the building in the sky that they saw. If you make certain assumptions, you get it's about 100 to 120 meter size. That's big, bigger than a blimp. And by the way, we did look into the blimp explanation in some detail. We couldn't find an advertising blimp that was in the area at that time, and there's not that many of them. So, this one, given the assumptions we have, is roughly 80 to 100 meters. So it could be the same object. We don't know. This one's during the day. That other one was at night. This one doesn't seem to be self-luminous. That one was. So we think, but they're about a month apart in the same area. We don't know if they're related or not. Yes, there are a lot of hot air balloons in that area, but hot air balloons don't operate at night. And that's not a hot air balloon. It's way too big for a hot air balloon. So we had what the point here is that these may have been related cases. We don't know, but that's the kind of search we conduct. We don't always get to the end point where we say, yes, hallelujah, related case, but that's where you have to go. You have to do as much work as you can to get as close as you can. Now I'd like to move on. Since I'm a little short on time, I'd like to continue with this high strangeness case. This was one that was a sketch we got from Pennsylvania. Okay, this one, this is one of the most fun cases we've done. It's also one of the weirdest cases. I would say it's the second or third weirdest case we've ever done. It is the only high strangeness case that I have ever worked where I've seen even a trace of physical evidence. And essentially what we have here is physical evidence of physical evidence. It's not the direct evidence you'd love to have, but I'm going to bring up the video and let the witness explain what happened to him. I need to bring this over here. Oh, come on. Work with me on this. Is it moving? Oh, I know what I have to do. Okay, hold on. Okay, there we go.
As many.
Well, maybe I won't do that. Let's see. It's not going to hide. Okay. Well, I will explain what I'll tell you in words, and later on you can watch the video. It's on our website. Well, it's on YouTube actually, but you can get to it through our website. Let's see. Okay. It's a complex case. This is a serial experiencer I'm not going to tell you all the experiences he's talked about. I'm just going to focus down on this one case where we had this little bit of evidence. And I'm going to simplify it down to the small number of events. Small number of events were a UFO sighting by him and his family in Ocean City while they were on summer vacation. His family was himself, his parents, and his sister. And they were, a few days later, after the sighting, he woke up in the morning and he found a small wire-like object embedded in his arm. He removed the object, which was embedded just deeply enough that a drop of blood came out with it. It was about 2 centimeters, maybe 1 centimeter. He says 2 millimeters on the video. I think it was bigger than that, probably about a centimeter. And had the approximate shape of the Greek capital letter omega. Did I accidentally skipped all this stuff? Didn't want to do that. Yeah, that's his sketch of what it looked like. By the way, we always encourage witnesses to make sketches and as soon as possible after the experience. There's a lot of evidence that making a sketch helps you remember better. So we encourage that. Now the sketch, you can see that this down here, is the one on the bottom there, it's much bigger than the actual object. It was about a centimeter or two. And we have, by the way, in Marcia's video that she produced of this, that we have a lot of information more. But the witness took this out of his arm, and he was going to throw it away, but he held on to it. He said, I want to keep this and have it analyzed. And he showed it to his father. He showed it to the rest of his family. So several people saw it. We confirmed with his father that he had seen it. His father, very skeptical guy, a medical doctor, did not think there was much to it. He just thought, well, you found a little wire in your arm, big deal. Maybe you got it off your bed or you got it off the railing or something. It probably didn't hurt, so you didn't even noticed it in there until later. But he took it and he put it in a little Ziploc bag, snack bag. You probably all have those at home. And he kept it with him that whole day. And the next day, that night, he said he was in the habit of taking his hat and his keys and his wallet and putting them inside his hat and then putting his hat on the dresser. He also added to it this little baggie that he had been keeping with him all day. So he woke up the next morning and the little wire was missing from the bag and there was a clear hole in the bag. And that's where we got involved. What I did, and I'll show you, I got these out of order, I apologize, but this little guy here comes later. Okay. Don't have the I couldn't show you the video. That's the bag that we photographed at the witness's residence, which was not in Ocean City but near Baltimore. You can see that tiny hole. It's about a centimeter, maybe 2 centimeters. It's just in the very corner of the bag. I looked at it under a small microscope, and I noticed that all the damage to the bag was right at the edge of the hole. There was no damage at all anywhere else. And it was very, very finely puckered up, like shriveled, wrinkled, just a very, very small amount, and then nothing behind that. And so I said, well, I'm going to see if I can duplicate that damage. And I did everything I could think of that would, okay, if I was going to hoax this, if I was going to, fool somebody or just, I'm playing games with this guy and I was messing with him, what would I do? Well, I'd probably just take the bag and tear it open, right? And, or, first thing you do is just open the bag and dump it out, right? But that didn't happen. So maybe tear it. Well, I tried tearing it. I tried cutting it with scissors. I tried poking it from the inside. I tried lots of different methods of producing a hole that size in the bag. None of them looked like the damage that we saw on the bag itself. Let's see if I can. Oh.
Was it melted?
Well, maybe, but I tried just applying heat from the outside. Didn't get that kind of damage. It was very different. The only thing that seemed to work was I wanted to apply high temperature, higher than the melting point of the plastic, which is about 110 degrees centigrade. The only thing I had that was that high temperature that could hit it fast and move through was solder. Solder is about 180 degrees centigrade. So it should, if it hits it before it cools off, it should melt the plastic and keep moving. So I did experiments with what I call a solder drop. I dropped hot solder into a bag, a very similar bag, and I got damage that was quite similar, which indicates that there was heat applied rapidly and that moved out of the bag, and either the heat source went away or it was now clear of the bag and so no longer could damage the bag. The guy didn't find any residue in his hat or in his other belongings, but I don't know how carefully he checked for it. So can't conclude much from that, but the damage from the solder drop was close enough that I thought, well, okay, this tells us something, that this would have been hard to hoax. Not impossible, but hard. Because getting down to 0% of chance of hoax is very, very difficult. Getting down less than 10% is a pretty good accomplishment. So my personal sense is that it's not a hoax. And Peter, how much time do we have? Okay. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to go till I run out of time. This was our analysis of that was we think the witness wasn't hoaxing us. We didn't think so with it anyway, because if you talk to the guy, he leaves you with the impression of tremendous sincerity. He's telling you what he remembers. He doesn't know that what he remembers is real. He just telling you what he remembers. Okay, case 18004. I just want to highlight that this was a case where we needed expertise to help us, and we never got it. This was all in Russian. There was clearly a language barrier, which we struggled with. We got a partial translation of this report. We think it's a real report. We think that may be a real CAT scan, but we don't know much more than that. The claim that the person had a close encounter. Okay, finally, again, report@ufo.org, or we'll take email at report@ufo@protonmail.com. We have other email addresses. If you want to be on our email list, just go to our contact form and say, please add me to your email list. We'll be doing that. If you want to report a UFO, go to report@ufo.org. Or if you know somebody else who wants to report one, it will be complete confidence, complete anonymity. We'll protect their data aggressively. There will be no leaks. And there will be, we will do, if their case really calls for a thorough investigation, that's what it'll get. And even if it takes us months, we'll do it. We've had a lot of field investigators come in and leave us because our field investigations are too hard. Our reports are too detailed, and our dive is too deep for them. And We just recently recruited a really good one. We really like her. She needs a case to work. So, yes. Yeah. If CAT scan, yeah, and I'm having trouble getting. That seems to be a foreign object of some kind. We don't know what it is, and without the expertise to evaluate it, I hesitate to say that it really is a foreign object. We think that report identifies it as a foreign object. The report's written in Russian and it's out of focus, but we did the best we could to get a translation of it. I don't think there's time for questions, so I'm going to.
Did you call Dr. Paul Stonehill about this case?
Who?
Paul Stonehill.
I don't know that person.
Okay, well, I can talk to you about him. Talk to him.
Okay.
He might be of some help.
Oh, Stonehill.
Stonehill.
Oh, yeah, I've run into him a little bit on social media.
Expert in Russian ufology.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, somebody is working this case who does have the Russian language skills. I haven't heard the results yet. So anyway, I think I'm going to wrap up.
We're going to take a bit of a break anyway, after I give something else away. So, Paul can hang around here for a while during the break, ask him some questions, but we're going to move on. So thank you very much, Paul.